In this episode of the Business of E-commerce, I talk with Chris Lamontagne about the strategies behind growth at Teespring. This is the Business of E-commerce, episode 138. Welcome to the Business of E-commerce, the show that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow the e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Plesky, and I'm here today with Chris Lamontagne. Chris is the CEO of Teespring, the social commerce platform behind YouTube's merch shelf that allows creators to design and sell their products online. In this interview, Chris gives a ton of tips on both growth, but also the mindset around creating a growth strategy. If you're a retailer and you're looking to grow, I suggest you listen all the way to the end because Chris shares some really great insights in this interview. So let's get into it. So hey, Chris, how you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Charles. Really great to be with you.
Yeah, awesome to have you on the show. I'm excited to kind of hear about your background and what you've been working on there. I love the whole growth mindset. I think this is kind of a big thing. Everyone's kind of, this is what everyone wants, right? You joined the company, I think we were talking before the show, about 4 years ago, but became CEO of Teespring in 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I initially joined the business in that growth role. So I was the director of growth for the business. And as a business, I think we've just been very growth orientated, really thinking about how do we take the business in new directions and how do we think about growth in a holistic way. So naturally, that kind of just evolved to be me becoming the CEO as the platform evolved. So it's kind of really become part of our core as a company, which I think is obviously quite an interesting way to build an organization when you've got that kind of growth at its heart.
When you say growth, like how do you even define that as a role? Because I feel like it's a very ambiguous term. Like everyone kind of wants to grow, but there's marketing and there's all these different things. Like, but what does like a growth team actually do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're totally right. You can be talking to people about growth roles, and it's interesting as we built that team. You get some people who are more paid marketing focused, some people who are brand marketing, growth hackers, all these different things. The best definition I've used, at least, is kind of more like a metaphor. Actually, the way we think about it is a business is really just a train that's continuing to move, and it's the growth team's job to be able to lay those tracks and to be able to keep that speed going. So as a growth team, and kind of pragmatically what that means is you've got to be the real arrowhead of the business. You've got to be the spear thinking about where this business is going next. And that could be things like partnerships. It could be marketing, it could be paid marketing. It could be even pure sales. And what we've built internally at Teespring is this core cross-functional team of like a lot of different people from different disciplines who are all tied together with the growth of the business from a top level revenue perspective or from a KPI perspective.
Yeah, because as you're growing, right, you guys, I don't know if you can kind of share some of the big, numbers, but like as you're growing each one of these marketing channels, the one that worked 2 years ago, either it's going to stop working or you're just going to max it out anyway. So it does, either way, you need to find more channels. So it's constantly, and that's I'm guessing part of the role, right? On every time it's just not working anymore, or or let's say same thing, you can keep advertising, but your ROI just starts going down over time, right? You stop maxing that channel out and you're just going to see worse and worse. You have to kind of find the next blue ocean for a channel.
Yeah, I think that's the nuanced thing about e-commerce particularly as well, right? Is what you were doing 6 months ago is definitely not what you're going to be doing in 6 months' time. So you've almost got to design your org in that way. And I think, from us as an organization, we really sat back and thought about, well, what are the dynamics that actually do drive growth in the business? And for us as a platform, and kind of how that's evolved, is we understood that our business model is B2B to C, in that we help creators sell their products to their fans, right? So we understood if once we really understood our business model, we were able to unpick what that growth strategy was going to look like. And essentially it was, how do we get more creators? How do we help them sell more product? And how do we do it in a real way that we can retain and drive quality and kind of retain that growth into the platform? And we stood back from that as kind of a challenge, almost as a whiteboard to say, like, well, what is that? What is our approach to be able to go and do that? And specifically, we came up with a model which was growth by partnerships. And, it's tried and tested in terms of using partners in that way. We were able to forge some real high value partnerships with people like YouTube, with people like Instagram, people like Twitch. We've got some more of those platform partnerships where we were able to build really deeply integrated relationships that were actually able to kind of start to create that acceleration. And, the number that we've just shared is Teespring is last quarter is growing over 100% year on year. We've also just delivered our fourth quarter of double-digit growth. So we're kind of back into hyper-growth mode, which is super exciting for the business. So I think, what proved right is the strategy that we came up with 2-3 years ago has very much come true with regards to, the results that it's been driving in the business.
Today's episode is sponsored by Drip. Drip is the world's first e-commerce CRM and a tool that I personally use for email marketing and automation. Now, if you're ever in an e-commerce store, you need to give Drip a try, and here's why. Drip offers one-click integrations for both Shopify and Magento. There's robust segmentation, personalization, and revenue dashboards to give you an overview of how your automation emails are performing. One of my favorite features of Drip is the Visual Workflow Builder. It gives you a super easy way to build out your automation rules visually and see the entire process. It lets you get started quickly, but also build very complex automation rules. It's powerful, but also easy to learn, unlike a lot of email tools that offer the same type of automation. To get a demo of Drip today, you can go head over to drip.com/BOE. That's drip.com/BOE. Now, onto the show. When you say a partnership with like a YouTube, for example, what's that look like? Are you actually like embedded in their platform now? And so if I'm a huge YouTube publisher and I want to get some t-shirts out to my fans, they can just hit a button and generate that? Or like, what's that actually look like?
That's exactly it. Yeah, we were able to build a very deep integrated partnership with YouTube, which was super exciting, where, creators who want to monetize, they have the ability to create products. So, Teespring was obviously founded on apparel and t-shirts, but now we have over 180 different products that you can launch on the platform. We've also got a system where we can work to source products as well for creators. So there's a lot of variability for a YouTube creator. But yeah, you're quite right. The integration itself that's embedded within YouTube. You can sign up from YouTube directly to Teespring, create products using the Teespring tooling that then show back up on the YouTube watch page directly underneath the video on a feature which we built, which was called the merch shelf. That sits directly underneath the video. So the integration's super neat in being able to put it in front of your fans and then to be able to watch your content and buy your merchandise, your products at the same time, which is, very much directionally where we see the world going.
Got it. Now, if I'm a retailer, I'm listening in and saying, sounds great, partnerships, because that's a channel, right? Like there's paid ads, SEO, there's all these different things, and partnerships is just another channel. But let's say you guys, back in, we had it start 2011? 2011, right? So let's say you guys 2012, was partnerships a growth channel then at that scale, or are they just with smaller partners, or was it something that you had, this is something we wanted to do, but we need to get to a certain scale to be able to even approach a YouTube?
Yeah, there's definitely a scale aspect to it. There's no hiding behind that. There's definitely a scale aspect to be able to partner with people in that way. Prior to that, though, I think, in terms of unpicking like the early growth of Teespring, there was a real viral loop in this ability to create a product online with zero inventory cost. So you're not having to put money up front. So the whole kind of print on demand world really exploded with that idea of like you can build a business without any upfront costs. So yeah, you're quite right in that partnerships wasn't always the number one focus. I think instead, product probably would have been the focus really of like driving growth through the product that you build. And that still kind of rings true today. Our value proposition of the product that we actually built is still incredibly high. We have a lot of signups coming to Teespring. Typically, we have about 300,000 users sign up every month to Teespring to come and create a product, which is just a phenomenal number. It shows that growth channel didn't die. We just were able to kind of layer on top some of these really high value partnerships on top of a growth strategy that we put in place back in 2011.
Okay, so this is almost like a second or maybe even third or fourth type of channel for you. So this whole partnership aspect isn't something, this is relatively new in the past couple of years.
It is, but I think you've got to really understand what channel actually means. I think channels, sometimes you can get very much into the performance marketing mindset when you talk channel. Is like, this is a channel which I'm gonna jam on for 6 months, and I'm gonna saturate, and then I'm gonna move on to something else. I actually think it's more of a tactic rather than a channel. And the way I think about that is, how do you map kind of what it is you're trying to drive? Our partnership are really still in the very early stages, in their nascent stages. And I think, the partnerships with someone like a YouTube, you're not going to saturate that channel. There's so many different more iterations off the back of that. So I believe that channel sometimes can be maybe the wrong definition in that respect. And in fact, it's building up like a set of growth tactics or growth strategy that kind of makes sense, that allow you to maybe think slightly broader with regard to how to design what a growth plan could look like.
So more of a strategy and an overall playbook that you can now execute that same playbook with the next, whatever the next, maybe Facebook. I don't know whatever the next partner is, but someone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So then it's a plan from there to basically rinse and repeat and say, okay, we made these, dozen partnerships. Let's make a dozen more that look just like this, or like, where does it go from there?
Yeah, I think there's two approaches. There's one which is like, okay, yes, we can repeat and partner more, but there's also one which is, how do we double click into this partnership? How can we actually continue to grow it and make it deeper? And maybe we want to internationalize. Maybe we want to add more products to our to the creators within that partnership. Maybe we want to do more marketing. I think there's kind of like your vertical expansion and your horizontal expansion. And really, you should be trying to do both. I think sometimes you can feel like you saturated particular tactics, but in fact, you've got to have that kind of ability to stand back and understand, well, there is growth to be sniffed out in these different tactics. And like, how do you have, whether it's a vertical or a horizontal approach to exploration there? I think you need to be able to have both.
Yeah. So, and the platforms have more creators every single day, right? So even if you just stay still, these are just grow. Like, there's a massive amount of growth here. This is like a career that 10 years ago didn't exist, to be a YouTube creator. Like, this is now, you can grow up and you can do this. And there's people out there that do this and make great money. So I think over the next 10 years, there's going to be just more of them. So even at, the same percentage of the pie is just going to be getting larger in this case.
Well, yeah, we have this approach where, Teespring's vision is to become the number one social commerce platform in the world.
What does that mean by that? Yeah, social commerce platform.
Well, social commerce, I think, it's super interesting to think about social commerce. There was a thesis around social commerce that we're connected online now. So whether it be you've got your Facebook, you've got Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, we've got these social graphs, we've got these social connections to people. And you may have 1,000 friends on Facebook or 1,000 subscribers. You may have 1 million subscribers or 1 million followers on Instagram. Whatever it is, we are socially connected. commerce as kind of like in its purest form is the exchange of goods. So the exchange of goods in that respect. So putting the two together is we're using the social connections that you have online and connecting commerce to it and being able to buy and sell products to your social graph, to the people that you're connected with. It's just mega powerful. And we think specifically, starting with creators and like really zeroing in on how we become the architecture for creators to be able to sell those products is very much where we want to be. And I think that's what we mean by the social commerce platform. Teespring isn't really a front-facing brand in that we don't need people to come to Teespring to buy products. In fact, we want to be the architecture that supports creators in bringing their brands to life. And creators in the broader sense of the word. If you're a top YouTuber with 10 million followers, right down to someone who hosts a fishing channel with maybe 1,000 followers who have got this real interest in this particular niche, we think we've built a platform that can really provide the commerce portion of that relationship.
When you get to see this future, is there other businesses that kind of have this path, that you're following, that you kind of look at them and say, like, they've done something similar to this, maybe a different industry, different vertical that kind of you look up to? Or is this something you guys are just completely forging your own concept here?
No, I think, look, we're standing on the giants of soldiers, right? When you look at, standing on the giants, on the shoulders of giants. That's the sense of I think specifically the, e-commerce, some incredible companies who've been able to really help people build brands. If you look at Shopify, what Shopify have done, I think is an incredible ecosystem. But I think, what we really look at is we look at a company like Stripe. So the payments company Stripe, who've built this layer of architecture that just makes it really easy to do payments. And there's all these kind of cogs and steam going on in the background to make that. But actually, it's like this real incredible kind of enabler to make things happen in that way. We kind of see it in actually quite a similar way to that is we want to do all the complicated nitty gritty parts of e-commerce and allow creators just to be able to surface their product, whether it be on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it may be. We want to be able to be the plumbing that allows them to do that.
Stripe's that's actually a great analogy, right? Because I remember back in, I'm dating myself here, but back in the 90s, getting my first, Stripe competitor, an authorized.net account. And the process was laborious. And it was the craziest process back then, with a phone calls and all this stuff. Versus fast forward to today, you can get a Stripe account in about a minute and it's infinitively better. And same process back in the 90s, you wanted to get a t-shirt printed. You had to drive down to some shop in the back of, and everyone's sitting there and it's this dingy shop and the guy had to do some screen printing and you need to do a run of however many, it was similar thing, right? Where it was really difficult to do. And now
it is. And, if you extend that to, if me and you were going to come up with a business today and we're right, we're going to start my own, I want to sell this product. Well, actually, if you break down the components where you've got to be able to design the product, you've got to realize it in that way. You've got to be able to feature that product in some way. You've got to be able to, when someone actually maybe wants to buy one of those products, you've got to be able to take the payment. You've got to be able to fulfill the product. You've got to be able to have customer service in case something goes wrong. Maybe deal with returns. And, that's just for one product. Then what if you want to create a line of different products? You want to have your own store. You want to sell on different channels. This is all still quite, even today, even despite all the architecture, it's still quite difficult to do. And I think what Teespring, in the direction that we're kind of moving in is we want to make that as simple and as straightforward and as intuitive as Stripe has done it for payments. And I think that's kind of the vision and kind of, what we're heading towards, which is just super exciting for us as a platform.
Yeah. So platform is the right word in that case. It's becoming, I think a lot of people throw around that term, but we're really talking about a platform here of same way Stripe is a platform and you can build on Stripe. So you actually want to be that platform, that the dial tone, if you will, when you pick up the phone, that's what's at the other end.
That's it. That's totally correct. I think that definition between platform and marketplace for us is who's our customer? Who's our customer? Our customer is the creator, and their customer is the buyer, as the fan.
Yep.
That's why I kind of reference the B2B2C model. That's kind of the appropriate definition for us. We're not trying to be a marketplace, and that's definitely a nuanced part of our history. We definitely went down that direction. But really, what's working for us is being a platform, and this social commerce platform is exactly what we're chasing down.
Got it. When you started 4 years ago, so you didn't start as the CEO, you moved into this role in the past couple of years, right? What was that like, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I come from an entrepreneurial background, so I've kind of I started my first company when I was 19. So I've been a CEO before. I then got like a really unique opportunity to work in some very fast-growing, high-growth companies. And I also worked at a VC fund as well. So I've kind of had the background of being in executive kind of positions. So I think it was it's a much bigger company. We're 350 people right now. So it's a big organization.
What was it when you started? Do you know the?
Good question. About 220 maybe. Yeah, 220, something like that. So we've got an account. But the honest answer to that, Charles, is it just felt very natural. It felt like a really natural transition for me, which was super exciting to do. Okay,
I like that. So then, if somebody's listening right now, a retailer, and what advice would you give to someone that kind of wants to have some, you guys had a trajectory, you're obviously growing fast. If a retailer is listening and they actually want to say, like, how does this apply to me? How does this help me? How can I use this? What kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think the reality is, particularly if we're talking in e-commerce or commerce in general, retail, however you want to think about it, I think really studying the ecosystem. There's so much happening in our space right now, not just in the US, but if you look at what's happening in China commerce, you look at all over the world, you've got to become an expert on your environment, on your landscape. And I think sometimes the common mistake is you can be so laser focused on your own business that things can pass you by without you even realizing what's going on.
Are you saying the competitive landscape, your market, or just e-commerce in general? Like how far out should you be looking?
Both really, I would say. I think competitive, most certainly, but I think the space as well. It's your duty to become an expert in your own domain. And I spend a lot of time looking up and looking out and like trying to understand other models. And I think that's kind of been one of the real true values for us is we were able to kind of almost see what was happening in the space a little bit before it happened and then make the appropriate moves. And I think it's really difficult, particularly if you're having a tough time in business, to find that inspiration. It's difficult to find the inspiration certainly internally sometimes. That's actually where it can be most difficult. So, dedicating enough time to look out into the open to kind of figure out, well, what are other people doing? How could I adapt that back into my model? How could I maybe shift and pivot? I speak to some entrepreneurs who are like, hey, this is my 3-year plan. You've my 5-year plan. I'm not sure our industry, I'm talking specifically about e-commerce, works like that anymore. I think you need to have principles, but you need to be flexible at the way you're thinking. And you also need to be ready to kind of rip it up and start again if you have to, which is dangerous. And not all companies are built in that way. But I think just having that kind of approach.
In 2020 is a year telling us that, right? This is,
of course it is. Yeah.
There's some retailers I talk to where you say, how's business been? And they're like, we literally got 0 orders this week, or other retailers saying we're doing Black Friday every day. And so it's like both extremes right now. I've kind of heard this year. So this is a year where plans don't really work, it seems like.
And look, there's a real lesson to be learned there. Is you've got to build resilience at your core. You've got to build resilience within your organization to be able to weather those things, whether it's at a financial level, whether it's at a people level. I think people for us, I've just got a group of toughened, entrepreneurial, incredible execution focused, like group of people who, when COVID came, they were like, okay, let's get to it. It wasn't like freak out. It was, no, let's run into the burning building and figure this one out. And that's why, we are where we are right now.
Yeah, I've seen some retailers that's kind of literally a business went to zero in a week, and then they pivoted and started selling masks and protective gear and just like the strangest things within a matter of like weeks, and just like a new site. And because the demand was there, the business, and some of them, it eclipsed their actual business, and it kind of helped them ride out this past 6 months, whatever this has been now.
And I think, look, you've got to see it as, again, it comes back to being fixed in the way you think, right? If you are fixed in that respect of, this is my business, this is how it runs, this is how it's going to run for the next 10 years, something like this can come along and change things very, very quickly, almost overnight. So, I think building business with that element of flexibility, I think, is just super important.
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely the year for that. I think this is the year where if people didn't know before, they're learning it now.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so.
Yeah, very cool. Any last kind of tips before I let you go? I was looking for things too you just recommend to retailers out there, and they want to feel the same success, and they want that.
Yeah, I think outside of outside of kind of that look out and look at for inspiration. The other big tip is I think looking for those adjacent kind of macros in like what else is happening in kind of adjacent spaces. So for me, as an example, I was looking at the way content platforms were kind of evolving. So people like YouTube and Instagram, and they were evolving and looking for new monetization tactics for creators. So that necessarily wasn't in my space. It wasn't in e-commerce, but trying to look at, well, what are the adjacent sectors that actually could impact your business, I think it's just a super interesting way for you to start thinking about what's the approach and how you can scale your business. And thinking about that in a bit more of a holistic way is interesting. So that's one area. I think the other area is teams and like building structures of like the right type of teams. You kind of touched upon it earlier, Charles, around like what is a growth team. I think doing a bit of an audit with regards to, are you growth focused? Even just the definition of calling your team a growth team rather than a sales team or a marketing team might actually just be a really good way to kind of recategorize how, as a business, you can start to scale. So sometimes some of the semantics that just kind of play into that is like, hey guys, we used to be marketing, we used to be sales. Now we're growth, and this is why, and this is what that means to the business. It's just a really quick tip of thinking how you can actually drive change in a very, very short space of time with really minimal effort.
Well, so that's one of those things, right? Just how you redefine that team. Because if you have your marketing team, hey, what do you guys do? We do marketing. But if you have a growth team, it feels a lot more they can choose. Are they doing marketing? Are they doing one-on-one sales? Are they a partnership biz dev? Like they can almost make up their role. And like you said, depending on what works today. So maybe today it's, okay, let's double down, focus on product, get more folks in here, get it to be easier. And that's what the growth team is doing. Versus fast forward several years, now the growth team is doing partnerships, and they can basically define their own role.
And that's it, right? And that's that kind of filling in where the business needs them. We constantly evolve in that way. I think, unfortunately, sales particularly has become a bit of a dirty word, in kind of being a sales team. It's like, it can have the wrong connotations. It's like someone's just going to sell me something and move on. But in fact, if you're positioned as like, no, this is our growth guy and he's focused on bringing on new accounts, well, actually maybe even just reprograms the individual's mindset as well. It's like there's such an inherent positivity and dynamism that's kind of that involved in calling someone, hey, you're on the growth team, which means you continue to move, you continue to evolve, which I think just sets you up for just much more dynamic approach to work, which, we've definitely been on the receiving end of seeing how beneficial that's been to the business.
I like that. That's a good tip. I don't think a lot of folks think like that, because you think of these silos, and you have your sales, and you have your marketing, and what is sales? And sales has to do sales, market has to do marketing. But once you kind of blend that, and maybe that's part when you talk about being more dynamic, right, and resilient, maybe that's part of it right there, right? Having teams that can almost be chameleons, right, and change the definition helps build in that more dynamic type of structure, right?
Most certainly. We've seen it firsthand. Someone who was a marketing person 6 months ago is now a partnerships person, and vice versa. And pure salespeople obviously would sit within the growth team, but they're framed as they are our growth managers, or in whatever way. And I think they think about the role in a very different way. So yeah, I think it's a good tip, maybe for people who are thinking about where maybe growth is stagnated. It's a good way to kind of rebuild an organization, without making too many changes.
Awesome. All right, Chris, if people want to find you, kind of learn more about you, follow what you're doing, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I love connecting with people with LinkedIn. I think it's such a great tool. I think it's such an underused tool as well on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Chris Lamontagne, and the CEO of Teespring. I typically accept most people, and I also post a lot around growth on there. I kind of try to regularly, sometimes I'm using Twitter, but LinkedIn is my main channel of comms, particularly on business. I want to keep it really, really focused for people, and I'm sharing a lot there.
Awesome. I'll drop a link to that in the show notes, and thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate it.
Hey, Charles, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.